A rivalry win or a national championship? What means more to Michigan or Ohio State? We bring in two former national champions and Marcus Ray and Cardale Jones to break it all down right here.
Brian Kelly's under a lot of pressure to win now. John Talty will join us to tell us why missing on Bryce Underwood is a good thing.
Plus, Colorado 2025 expectations. What does it look like without Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders? Adam Munsterteiger from BuffStampede.com joins us later in the show. All that and more right here on the Ultimate College Football Show. Show. That's Smoke Dixon. I'm Cooper Patagna. We got a great show for you today, but first, we're going to start it off with the opening kick. In some surprising news, Ross Dellinger and Dan Wetzel of Yahoo Sports are reporting that Clemson and Florida State are nearing an agreement with the ACC to end ongoing litigation in exchange for changes in revenue distribution and clarity on the ACC grant of rights. If the agreement is finalized, which is to be expected to be put to vote and approved on Tuesday, it would cause multiple ripple effects across not only the ACC, but college football. Big news here in college football, especially in the ACC. Smoke, what's your biggest takeaway on what we heard this morning?
Open up that door of parity and walk right through it because we're done with parity. The rich is getting richer, the best is getting better, and everybody else is just trying to figure this thing out.
I enjoyed it for the 2 minutes that we had it. Parody was nice. And with that, let's welcome on national college football writer Brandon Marcello to break it all down for us right here on the Ultimate College Football Show. Brandon, I just kind of want to start with a very simple question. Why settle this now?
Well, it's a short-term fix. It's a Band-Aid, so to speak, because Florida State and Clemson were really kind of pushing the issue here that we're going to leave this conference sooner rather than later if you don't give us what we want. We've got to close that gap when it comes to revenue payouts from the conference level that are happening similarly in the Big Ten and the SEC, which is by far and beyond what the ACC was paying out. This sets it up to where schools like a Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina, maybe even a Miami, depending on their success and the type of TV ratings they bring in, they can close that gap and get paid an additional $20 to $30 million if they hit some benchmarks when it comes to television rating and also with their success on the field. There's a lot of stuff in the formula. They're still trying to tweak it and figure it out. But in the end here, Florida State and Clemson mostly will be happy for the next few years going forward with this new agreement.
So, Brandon, at the end of the day, you're just saying the person that's the squeakiest gets the oil and everybody else is kind of just sitting back there just playing in limbo? But
yeah, and what's crazy to me is that a lot of schools decided, hey, this is okay with us. We're going to get a less of a payout every year, almost guaranteed, because our programs just do not have the type of success that everybody else does. And now Florida State and Clemson, which if they had left, could have potentially put this in a spot where the ACC would dissolve, because I think you would have had other programs try to leave the conference themselves. The big question I have and a lot of people in the industry had was, did Florida State and Clemson or even North Carolina or Miami actually have a landing spot somewhere? And from the people I've talked to over the last 2 years now, said they didn't. There was nothing in place there. There was no really kind of flirtations going on from the Big Ten or the SEC. And in a lot of ways, they called their down the line, 6 years from now, maybe even less, we're probably going to be in the same situation again, asking if the ACC is going to dissolve.
So what teams in the ACC potentially?
Best they've had on the field in football. Miami, obviously, especially coming off last year with the success they had, they're starting to trend back up to what we are accustomed to seeing with their success on the field. Also, they're just a big draw nationally with the television ratings. North Carolina, obviously, I mean, Bill Belichick being there now, there's going to be a lot of curiosity from fans to watch that team, much like with Deion Sanders at Colorado. Plus, the North Carolina basketball program is one of the top rated programs when it's on television as well. So those programs are the ones that stick out, the ones that are going to benefit the most from this and are going to be comparable financially at the end of the day with their revenue to, say, an SEC or Big Ten team.
Brandon, it's a copycat world that we live in, and I kind of wonder how soon can we expect a Big Ten or the SEC to maybe follow suit here of the ACC?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Overton window. It's this idea that anything that's socially acceptable is within this own little window. And over the last 4 to 5 years, it's been expanding and moving ever so slightly to let us know exactly what is acceptable, whether now it's players getting paid, the revenue sharing, NIL, and now you have programs taking their own conferences to court and saying, we want more money or we're leaving. Well, this is nothing new, though it's been a little bit quieter in the past. Remember, the Big 12 years ago had similar circumstances with OU and Texas. Now the question is there a power program out there in another conference, say even the Big 10 or the SEC, that'll sit there one day and go, you know what? We should not be getting paid the same what Vanderbilt's getting paid or what Mississippi State is getting paid. We want more money. My feeling is right now, no one's going to raise that stink in the SEC and Big Ten because they're still on top when it comes to the financial revenue and everything going on. But because of this Overton window, it's constantly expanding. Revenue sharing is about to come up. All these athletic departments are pinching pennies, even the richest ones. At what point, 2-3 years from now, where they're spending all this money and going, man, we should be getting more money in so we can go build new facilities. Why is Vanderbilt getting as much money as us? We're Texas. We can't be having this. That's my concern. And again, what is normal in college athletics has been changing and shifting over the last 4 to 5 years. And this potentially could be the next step. And then, of course, remember, this is only a Band-Aid for the ACC. I think they're going to be in the same position 6 years from now when the buyout to get out of that grant of rights drops under $100 million. Florida State and Clemson really right now, even a Miami or North Carolina, can sit there and raise money these next 6 years to pay that buyout and go do something else. Or who's to say that other programs and other conferences go, you know what? We should be getting paid more here in the SEC than Vanderbilt or Mississippi State. And the SEC goes, well, you're going to have to take us to court over that. And they go, well, we won't. We're just going to go leave and create our own league with Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, and Clemson. I think anything's on the table now. Everything's driven by money. And again, we've seen one extreme to another extreme, and this has become more acceptable than ever. I think anything is possible over these next 6 years.
Yeah, we see the dollar market going up with the GMs, coaches, big impact names for coaches. But with this potential act, how does this impact the hiring process for the next round or cycle of coaches?
I think we're already seeing it just because of conference realignment to a certain extent. Always it's been that the blue blood programs feed off the middle tier programs, the middle tier programs feed off the lower tier programs. And in the ACC, you've already seen that a little bit. For example, at Wake Forest, Dave Clawson steps down as head coach. And who they go hire? They go hire Washington State's head coach, Jake Dickert. And on paper, you go, wow, that's a big hire. But that's Wake Forest, which is in a better financial position in the ACC than Washington State, which is out there trying to rebuild the Pac-12, and they're getting less of a payout. 2-3 years ago, that would have been unimaginable. But now it's different. Wake Forest is seen as a better program because of financial stability than Washington State. Now you add this unequal revenue sharing piece to it all. All it's going to do is separate Wake Forest further away from Florida State and Clemson within their own conference. Also, that means Wake Forest is going to be even further below the SEC, where they already were in the bottom tier. I mean, listen, Vanderbilt, the lower tier teams in the SEC are automatically going to be richer than Wake Forest now, or heck, maybe even a Virginia. That is going to hurt the bottom line in the next 2 to 3 years, especially as every team in that conference is paying $20.5 million to their players.
Brandon, you've done a beautiful job throughout this interview bottom lining this for us, but I do kind of want to re-tee you up here because if you're a fan of SEC, Big Ten, just college football in general, maybe you're not a fan of a team in the ACC. What is the bottom line for a team like Vanderbilt, like you were talking about, or one of these other teams on another side of the country that they would be looking at this deal in the ACC and saying, how could this potentially impact my team maybe a decade from now?
Well, as you said earlier, the rich get richer, poor get poorer. That's exactly what this is. And with revenue sharing on the horizon starting in July, I mean, everybody's going to try and pay $20.5 million in these power programs. Some are not going to be able to do that. Some are having to go pull out loans to help pay that. I mean, it's crazy out there. If you're a Vanderbilt or someone else, you just better hope you have a big booster with big pockets to make you competitive when it comes to revenue sharing. Because in the future, especially in the ACC, because they're setting this up, you're not going to be getting that money from your conference. And potentially in the future, if other programs raise a stink in these other conferences, they could follow that. And as you said, we're in a copycat sport. And other programs, I'm sure, are going to see this and go, why can't we do that?
Brandon Marcello, we appreciate it, man. I know you've been in the gym, so appreciate you making time for us, brother, as always. ACC, grant of rights, never a boring day in college football. You can find all of Brandon's work at cbssports.com, and that includes his latest article, 25 storylines that you need to know for the 2025 season. All right, one of the 25 things that Marcello talked about in his article, by the way, was how Colorado will replace two huge stars in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter in Prime's third season as the Buffs head coach. To take a look at the fallout from Colorado's best season since 2016 and what lies ahead, let's welcome in Adam Munsterteiger of BuffStampede.com. Adam, great to see you, man. As always, we welcome you in. And I just got back from Indy, the NFL Combine, the talk of the town. Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, everywhere you go, that's where the cameras are. I want to ask you just about the legacy that these two have left on this program. We're talking about a team that won 9 games for the first time, like I said, since 9 years ago, almost a decade ago. What have those two meant specifically to this Colorado program this day and age?
Well, there's a hall right by the indoor practice facility at Colorado called Legacy Hall, and that's where they have all the All-American lists and all of the big awards, national awards that have been won by Colorado Buffaloes over the years. They've got to have a major renovation going underway in that hallway with Travis Hunter taking home as many awards as he did. You start with the Heisman Trophy, just the second to win that award in Colorado football history. And the 9 wins, depending where you are, might not be all that impressive, but when you look at where Colorado was just 2 years ago, by far the worst FBS program in the country, to get to that point, it did take a heroic effort by both those guys and other guys, obviously, as well, to get this program back to where it was. Unfortunately, didn't go out the way they wanted to by getting blown out by BYU in the Alamo Bowl, but their legacy is gonna linger around Boulder for forever. I mean, what those two guys were able to accomplish.
Yeah, we talk about legacy, but shoot, production in terms of points and value and bringing people in, sitting them in the seats. What are the biggest issues ahead of the 2025 season for Colorado, knowing we still have the spring portal window wide open?
Adam, you got us?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So just re-teeing the question real quick, just from a 2025 standpoint, going back, obviously you look at last season, offensive line play, protecting Shedeur Sanders was obviously a topic of conversation throughout. Where do you think Colorado can take a next step? We know they got to replace 2 of the top players in all of college football, but in terms of addressing this roster, where is it Colorado has the most holes to fill?
In terms of the roster, it's continuing to improve the offensive line and replacing those 4 receivers that are going off to the NFL. But really the biggest issue for this program is not necessarily a position need. It's being more balanced offensively. They passed the ball 64% of the time each of the last 2 seasons. Not surprisingly, given that number, Colorado ranked dead last in the FBS ranks in rushing yards both of those seasons. So it made it a lot easier for opposing defensive coordinators to tee up their guys against Colorado when you didn't have that threat of a really strong run game. So Colorado led the Big 12 in sacks defensively last season with 37, but partly because they weren't balanced offensively, they gave up 39 sacks on offense. So you even talk to offensive linemen, they typically get a lot of mojo and a lot of confidence in the run game. And so at times when other teams were teeing off, especially 2 years ago in 2023, there was a confidence issue there. Not so much this past year, but just not being able to be balanced offensively was the biggest issue with it, that they have to get figure it out going forward because they're going to have a new quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is not going to be behind center, so you're going to have to be more balanced.
Well, speaking of, I want to talk about that quarterback position, right? That seems to be where the conversation is in Boulder. They bring over Caden Salter, a very veteran, experienced quarterback from Liberty. He had a big year in 2023, a little bit of a downtick in production last year. And then Julian Lewis, a highly touted quarterback from Carrollton High School in Georgia. Can you give us a little inside look on what to expect this spring as those two battle it out?
Yeah, it should be a really tight competition because everything we've heard about Julian Lewis since he got on campus is that despite the fact that he should be a junior in high school right now because he reclassified, he is mature beyond his years. He's begging staff to let him get into the facilities late at night to be able to throw to guys. And so he's somebody that's going to push Caden Salter, but I think if you gave an edge to one guy going into spring, you'd have to go with the experience that Salter had. Over 8,000 yards during his time at Liberty, was the Group of 5 Player of the Year in 2023, helped the Flames to an undefeated regular season, went back to Liberty last year and kind of surprised some people when he did that. Now he's got 1 year of eligibility left, and he wants to gain that exposure that you can get at Colorado with it being his last year of eligibility. Very, very good in the RPO game, and that's something that would be aiding what I just said was an issue last year of them being more balanced. They did RPO stuff with Shedeur Sanders, but you knew that he was not as much of a threat in there because you didn't want him taking more unnecessary hits. But that could be an area of Caden Salter's game that does allow Colorado to be a little bit more well-balanced. But Julian Lewis is a winner. He was 39-4 at Carrollton over 3 years of high school football. That 2 of those years being his freshman and sophomore year of high school. So again, mature beyond his years physically. Is he mature enough to be a quarterback one in the Big 12? And I think that's something that we'll find out as we get into these spring practices and through the summer. They also have Ryan Staub on scholarship. He started a game for Colorado in their finale of 2023 at Utah. So he's in the mix as well as a scholarship guy. But most expect this competition to come down to Salter and Juju Lewis.
Adam, Smoke and I have been talking about it all day, 2025 realistic expectations for Colorado. We're going to talk about that here in a second, but I want to get your opinion on where is a realistic landing spot, maybe from a win total standpoint for the Buffs in 2025.
Yeah, you guys were talking about parity earlier. That's the theme of the Big 12 these days. And you have to, if you're going to talk about predictions in early March, you got to mention the fact that last year in the preseason media poll, Arizona State was picked last, BYU 13th, Colorado 11th, and Iowa State 6th. Those all 4 finished atop the Big 12 standings with a 7-2 conference mark. So this is a conference where you're going to have teams that way outperform the expectations. Given the amount of talent that they've brought into the program the last 26 months, having a pretty challenging, but I wouldn't call it a daunting schedule. I would say that the floor is probably 6 wins with that ceiling, Colorado being back in contention to play for a conference title game late in the season again, like they were last year. But obviously it's going to be tough. They're replacing Shedeur, Travis, and some other guys, but there has been an influx of talent in this program to the point where this is a program where bowl games are expected now.
Adam Munsterteiger, man, we appreciate you as always. Appreciate you jumping on with us to talk Colorado football. And for more Adam Munsterteiger and everything that you need for Colorado football in recruiting, make sure to check out buffstampede.com. You heard Adam talk about it, the expectations. He said the floor was around 6. I think you and I have been kind of talking about, all right, what does the ceiling look like, whether it's Caden Salter, whether it's Julian Lewis. I kind of want to start with the quarterback conversation first because we've seen a lot of these young guys play, whether it's a former 5-star and Dante Moore at UCLA play early, then he transfers to Oregon. Now he's got the redshirt year. Jackson Arnold played in the bowl game as a freshman. Rocky year last year at Oklahoma. These young guys playing, and Adam alluded to, I mean, Julian Lewis is a reclass, right? Mm-hmm. It's not always the best path for these guys to play early. What do you think about that quarterback situation there in Boulder?
And you're forgetting one of your favorites, DJ Lagway.
That's right.
Saved somebody's life last year. Extended. Everybody down in Florida got an extension. But when you look at young guys like that come in that can give you an impact, as long as you have a veteran quarterback that's ahead of them, that they don't have to have that much pressure, that you can ease them in to the game, just like they did with DJ Lagway last year in Florida, and just say, you know what, we're going to give you a package a package of 10 to 15 plays that you're going to play every game until we figure out to the fourth game that either you're ready or you're not ready for a college season where we're not going to burn your red shirt. So to me, it's always a good thing when you can always keep that young player engaged and not just allow him to know the entire playbook, which can just get too much for him, and just give him a package to work his way in, and then you can truly see his impact on the team.
Is it enough nowadays? You know, the NIL, these guys got to play early. I would assume Colorado, Deion Sanders is going to be in a situation where they're going to have to find some time for Julian Lewis to play. On the other hand, I look at Cormani McLean. They didn't sugarcoat things with him at all, right? So Deion Sanders wants to run his program a certain way. The final question here, the win total. Where do you kind of land on Colorado next year?
I'm going to land on a 7-win season, which is not bad because I just heard expectation is bowl games. A few years ago, they only had, 1 or 2 wins. So I think if they figure out how to be in a 7 to 8 win category, just knowing that they're mending and waiting time for Juju to come along and be the guy, I think that'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah, 7 to 9. You know, I think that's kind of where I land. High side, 9 games with a bowl victory as well, 7 games as well. So you look at Colorado; they've come a long way in a short amount of time. The other thing, Pat Shurmur, Robert Livingston. We didn't get to talk about him. We were supposed to talk about him in that segment. It's got a lot of buzz, man. They've done a great job with their coordinators.
Listen, Coach Livingston, one of the most underrated hires of last year. We sat down and talked about it off camera, Coop. The NFL wanted him back. But he said, no, I'm going to stay in Boulder. And the impact that he had on that defense, we heard about the sack total, but just the pressure. And when you talked about Colorado last year, you weren't just talking about the offensive game plan. You were talking about their defense creating pressure and turnovers. Awesome hire.
Yeah, continuity goes a long way, too. Look for them to take another step in 2025. Guys, it's that time of the show. Burning questions, submit them now in the chat, as Smoke and I will take those at the end of the show. Smoke, I am ready for those, my man. Burning questions,
Seat's
always my
hot.
favorite. It's the first time I will be here for the burning questions segment, so I am fired up for that. All right now is time for the latest edition of College Football Confidential with one of our favorite guys, John Talty from CBS Sports. Always doing the best in the business, always looking dapper as heck too, John. Great to have you on the show, my man. Your biggest storylines, man, just in terms of teams that have won the offseason. I'm excited because this team was on top of the transfer portal, a team that I think we're all familiar with here, LSU. It is a make or break year for Brian Kelly in Baton Rouge. And John, I think it was you who's kind of dangling the question out there. Hey, is missing out on Bryce Underwood the worst thing in the world? You're going to have to talk some LSU fans off a ledge with what they've done in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, let's start. It was a huge blow, right? And we all know that. I think everyone on the show is a believer of Bryce's talent, and I think that was a huge get for Michigan. But I think what we realize that of increasing importance in college football, and it's going to matter even more and more in the future with the rev share world, is it's finite amount of resources, right? Some schools feel like they have unlimited, but there is a finite amount. There will be, especially moving forward. And how you choose to use that money is going to be really important. And so losing Bryce Underwood, which the numbers were 8 to 10 million total package, maybe even more, all kinds of different numbers out there, that's a significant outlay of money. And by losing Bryce, I think what they were able to do is then be more aggressive this past transfer portal window, load up on talent across the board, getting some top wide receivers like Nick Anderson and Barrion Brown, loaded up on offensive linemen. They got guys like Patrick Payton. I mean, they had, as you said, Coop, the top portal class, and I think that money helped in that department. And I think what I'm happy about is that, the past cycle or two, LSU has not been as aggressive as I think they should have been. Last year, if you guys remember, Brian Kelly kind of complaining about the price of talent, that they weren't going to spend $1 million on a defensive lineman. Well, they needed guys like that last year. They weren't able to get over the hump. And I think with the guys they brought in this past December, it's going to allow them to have a much better shot of competing in the ACC and living up to the expectations that that LSU fan base has.
Well, listen, John, missing out on Bryce Underwood, we can make this as good as it sounds, but it's never good when you miss out on a talent like that. I'm talking about Coop and I think that this guy can change the trajectory of your program for the next 3 to 4 years. And
I believe you called him generational, Smoke.
Potential to be a generational talent. But I get it. It's a win-now situation. that BK's in down there in Baton Rouge, and he has Garrett Nussmeier to go ahead and lead that offense. So when you look at it, it's really more of what are we looking for the next 2 years from now of what that team is looking like. And he's just spending his money saying, you know what, I'm going to cash in on my future today and worry about tomorrow and what the future program looks like another time.
Hey, John, I want to ask you a question, and maybe this is something that I'm just kind of working up in my mind a little bit, but I look at like critical year fours for Brian Kelly, for Lincoln Riley out west, and you think about these programs that even though Brian Kelly has won 29 games in his first 3 years, the standard there in Baton Rouge is a little bit higher. The seat is starting to warm up a little bit more in L.A. Do you feel like these programs and ADs now feel like it's a lot easier to correct course now with NIL and the transfer portal and say, you know what, 1 year like LSU has done this year in the transfer portal, we're going to make a concerted effort. And on the short term, we're going to get things back on track. And long term, things will kind of even out as we go as well.
Yeah, I think it's a blessing and a curse because I think that there is that easy fix potentially available to you. But the downside is that we've seen programs do it, so there's more pressure on people, right? I think we've seen teams take big jumps in year 2 where that causes other fan bases and ADs and others, well, why aren't we doing that here? So the fact that we're talking about year 4 with Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley speaks to the amount of money invested in them and the prominence that both of them had before they took their jobs. Because now I think we're seeing year 2, year 3, where that pressure is really cranking up. I think we're seeing that some in Auburn right now, a few Frees too, where the portal class that they just added also felt like an all-in, we have to win this year. So I think with BK and with Lincoln, you're seeing that potential where it's, let's take a big run short term. We have to be more successful here. And to Smoke's point earlier, it's how you use your money. Maybe Bryce would have cost $2 million. That $2 million, most likely, unless something terrible happened to Garrett Nussmeier, was going to be sitting on your bench this year. So the long-term value was there. Short-term, maybe not. Instead, you're using that $2 million or so to deploy for short-term, let's win this year. And I think that's where you're going to see teams strategize of, can we go for it this year, whether out of desperation because they've had a bad year the year before, or, hey, maybe we're 2 pieces away from really competing for a national championship. Let's pour in that extra money for the short term, and we'll worry about the long term next year. And you see some teams that have had success doing that the last couple of years.
The short term investment seems more like a stabilizing agent. And if you can master the short term, and then that helps out the long term as well. I mean, you look at LSU, I think they've taken 16 transfers. They completely remade their secondary, a couple new starters on the offensive line. They've gone for it at the receiver position as well. And, you think at the end of the cycle, the whole conversation was losing Bryce Underwood. The sky is falling. Now LSU, with what they've done in the transfer portal, has gone from a bubble team on the playoffs to now a team that you would expect to be in. So that's going to be fascinating as well. John, a team that's maybe on a different side of the coin that has had success is Penn State. They're one game away from being in the national title. They fall short of that as well. You listed them as another team that's done some good things this offseason. Why is it that you like what James Franklin and the Nittany Lions have done?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start here. I've admittedly been skeptical of James Franklin in the past. We all know the stats against top 10 teams. I felt like against Notre Dame was such a great opportunity for them to make the national championship, and felt like they kind of blew it. So let me start there. I've been negative at times about him in the past, but what I think we've seen them have a lot of success with is twofold. One, going out and getting a guy like Jim Knowles, I think, was a really strong hire. Stealing him from Ohio State, coming off a national championship, get interest from other programs, including Oklahoma State. That's a big hire, a great replacement, I think, for Tom Allen. That's part of it. The other piece is just the retention, having guys like Drew Allard come back, having guys like Nick Singleton come back. That's, I think, allows them to have, probably top 5 or so level of talent returning this year. And I think where you see the path for success of Penn State is similar to what we've seen from the last 2 national championships at Michigan, Ohio State. Both of them had this kind of last dance type feel where we're going to spend extra money to retain, get guys to come back rather than going to the NFL. Again, maybe we spend a little more than we typically would to get that extra piece or two, Still think Penn State needs a wide receiver, but let's try to get as much of the talent to come back and make one big run at trying to win it all. Michigan did it. We saw them take a step back this past year. Ohio State worked for them. I think they might take a little step back too, though I'm really bullish about what Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith can do together. But Penn State feels like they've ramped up to this moment where they're all in this year. They're doing as much as they can resource-wise to try to win it all. And then next year, because they're so senior heavy, they'll probably take a step back. And that just seems to be kind of the way things are working right now in college football.
Yeah, you said it perfectly, Coop. And what we got to think about is what's won the last couple of years. Michigan, veteran team. Ohio State last year, John, you touched on it, another veteran team. So all Penn State is doing is what most GMs and guys in the personnel offices are doing. They're saying, you know what? The best thing that we need to do is just retain our team. Roster retention is at height. And when you have guys that can be possible 5th or 6th round draft picks, what you do is you pay those guys now potential first round, not first round money, but NFL rookie salary cap money, which is $500,000 to $600,000. And if you're doing that right now, what you're doing is saying, I'm going to take this team that I just had that finished up in the semifinals, and we're going to bring it back and run it one more year, get 2 years now with the offensive coordinator, Andy Kownecki, with Drew Allar, and saying, where can we go with this offense? Because I do believe that he's an NFL-type quarterback with NFL-type running backs, and that offensive line just got better.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, is where you put your resources. And I think that if you're not a very good team right now, again, you go kind of the let's go heavy to try to get better, or let's invest on younger guys. If you're a new coach, you can invest in putting more of your resources to the younger talent that you're going to grow over the next 2-3 years. Penn State, veteran team, win now. And I think that's what I think more and more of the playbook is going to be. I think and we've talked about this in the past, what Alabama and Georgia and those other programs used to do where they're just stockpiling talent year over year, it's just hard to do that now. Retention costs are too high. There's too many other programs that are promising starting spots and more money. And so it feels like the days of a team, dominating year to year are going to be harder and harder to come by. And again, maybe it's more you're ramping up for every 2 years you have a real shot or something close to that. It feels like it's very hard year after year to be either winning or in that championship game just because of how many other teams are investing money, how much money has flooded the market, all those different factors. Again, I think Michigan's a great example of that. And then to tie it all together, what we were talking about earlier, Michigan has a down year. What do? They go out and get Bryce Underwood because now they have this money and they want to take a big swing. And so you're going to see teams kind of ramp up and ramp down. Hey, we might not have the horses to really win this year. Let's save some of our money. And then next year, when we have more of a veteran team, let's go out and buy, bigger and better players to be ready to compete, knowing that this year maybe we don't have that type of team to really compete at that level.
Yeah, that's showing up in the portal too. I mean, you think about it this year, we're a little bit more conservative with the grading, but you think about the players at the top, Isaiah World, Damon Wilson, we only had 2 5-stars. And what's interesting with college football now with the 12-team playoff, I don't think you necessarily know when your window is going to be. Like if you were to have an honest conversation with James Franklin last year, would he have said, hey, we're going to be 1 game away from the national championship? Maybe he would have said that, but he was probably saying, you know what, 2025 is our year. We got all our guys coming back. We had the returning production. The point being here, and I kind of see this with Florida. Florida has gone the retention route. They weren't really active in the portal. That's okay, and we'll see how that pans out. But when you have a quarterback like a DJ Lagway or a quarterback like a Drew Allar, potential first-round draft choices, you have a very limited window. You're talking about 3 to 4 years here. So why not surround them with all the talent possible to give them everything that they need to win a national championship? And John, you brought it up, you slipped it in there earlier in the show, but I was just kind of thinking, like, has Penn State done enough at receiver? And I get it. I think the response is going to be Kyron Ware-Hudson. We got the receiver from Troy. I don't know. That's my big question mark. And you're losing Tyler Warren as well. And I'm bullish on some of the young tight ends and Luke Reynolds. And obviously you got Singleton and Katron Allen coming back. But shoot, man, try to make this as easy as possible.
Well, John Coop, I'm going to tell you what James is probably saying in his back. I got 2 of the best running backs. My quarterback is an NFL type of talent. All I need is just a couple of players on the outside, not to drop the ball, John, but to catch the ball. And we can manufacture plays and opportunities for us to score and win in a national championship type of setting.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, Smoke. And again, I'm going to go back to what Coop said. I still feel like there's another missing piece, and that I feel like this past year's team, if they had, Keandre Lambert-Smith, who ended up going to Auburn, is that missing piece that maybe gets them over the hump? I mean, they're in such a great position that, again, just me selfishly not involved at Penn State would just like to see them go out and get a spring receiver. I just think that you're going to need that little bit extra so teams aren't loading up too much to stop it. But I love what they have coming back. And again, they're one of the teams that I feel like has had one of the best off seasons out of anybody.
It's a good to great conversation. It's a good place to be in, to be having that conversation as well. John Talty, we appreciate you, man. As always, guys, just a reminder, you can find John Talty's work at CBSSports.com. You can also find his book, The Price, What It Takes to Win in College Football's Era of Chaos.
Obviously, there's no need to hype it. It's a playoff game. It's a rivalry game. It's at the highest level.
The greatest rivalry in sports. That's what I think of. And I'm a Columbus kid, so I grew up a lot around that rivalry. And it literally, watching that game growing up was like another holiday.
I've been a part of other great rivalries. This is one that's so unique that the hatred is there, dislike is there, the anxiety to win that darn thing is there. However, deep down there's an incredible amount of respect.
The greatest rivalry in college football. Whichever team usually wins that game goes on do great things later on in the season.
All right, we now welcome in former Michigan national champion, 1997 Marcus Ray, 2014 Ohio State national champion Cardale Jones. I was going to hype this Q&A up a little bit more, but it seems like our video did that itself. Jim Harbaugh says you can't hype this game up enough. Cardale Jones, I want to start with you, man. The last time Ohio State won a national championship before this year was in 2014. I want to ask you the question, what's more important to you, a national championship or winning the game?
I'm gonna have to go with winning a national championship, and first and foremost, all due respect to my our fellow questionee here, Mr. Ray. Love what you did at your time in college football and making your impact. But I got to go with winning a national title, and the only reason because every year is, outside of having another COVID year, where it's going to shut down the world of some things that we can't foresee, you're going to have an opportunity to play against your rivals. Every year, you're not going to have an opportunity to be in position and a contender to compete for national title.
Always good to see you, 12 Gauge, man. I saw you at the airport, about a month ago, brother.
Yes, sir.
So lot of respect there, and I followed you in high school. My answer would be winning the national championship is every program's goal. And I think when it comes down to the Ohio State-Michigan game, that game is last, so it has conference title implications, has national implications. It also shows, it impacts where other teams fall. Like, to be honest, I mean, I don't have any problem with the Buckeyes, but their last two national titles was in a flawed system in year one. So, but once they find a way to fix it, and then, but my thing is, in Ann Arbor, we don't wake up and eat, sleep Ohio State. I mean, I think Jim Harbaugh kind of brought that back after the losing streak. But you want to win the game, but the national title is always, it always lasts longer, and it means more.
You said it now, Marcus. They won a national championship, but you said it was a flawed system. We'll hold back on that. But you guys have won 4 in a row. How does that change for the way that you feel about this rivalry game?
Well, I was a little concerned when Jim Tressel took over and the things he did and all the success and great players and teams. And, I'm a Columbus guy, too. I'm born and raised, went to Eastmoor High School. So I'm like the only guy that truly, from the Michigan standpoint, beat Ohio State 3 times, was an All-American national champion. But I'll tell you this much. I said 4 years ago I didn't think Michigan would ever beat Ohio State again. When I watched Cardale Jones and those guys do all the amazing things that they did, they just went on an unprecedented run in that rivalry. And I think what Jim Harbaugh called off sick during COVID, that's what he did. He called off sick, and he knew he was getting ready to put a class together, get a quarterback, and build something. The last 4 years, now those guys in Ann Arbor, they expect to win. That's why they went into Columbus, and they beat them on the field, then they beat them up after the game. I mean, there's a different mentality in Ann Arbor, but Ohio State had dominated for so long. I just think that now they expect to win in Ann Arbor, regardless of what the records are, back in the way it used to be when I was growing up and when I played.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point because when I was at Ohio State, the year before prior, Ohio State went up there and lost in 2011. Braxton Miller was a freshman quarterback, and the school was going through a lot of turmoil with Jim Tressel resigning and Luke Fickell taking over as interim head coach. And then that was the stressful thing. That was one thing that Coach Meyer stressed was, you don't lose that team up north. And I think everything we did to really develop that mentality and that mindset outside of me being a kid from Cleveland, Ohio, who grew up with that rivalry right in my backyard in the years I was growing up. It was a lot of back and forth, but I think Michigan ultimately have the edge over my years of growing up and paying attention to the rivalry. But Coach Meyer did such a great job of establishing a culture that you don't lose that game. And I think because of two reasons. One, because we know the team knew what it felt like to lose that game. Coach Meyer was on the staff prior as a intern and went back and forth with winning and losing that game and saw what it did to the city, saw what it did to him and the team personally. But then, two, usually the team who win that game historically has gone on to play for the Big Ten championship game and in the Rose Bowl or college football playoffs berth. So it was more than just a rivalry. I think the new era of college football played more into the hands of that rivalry because so much is on the line when you talk about that final rivalry week, not just for Ohio State and Michigan, but all around the country. But with the new era of college football with its 12-team playoffs, to me, the rivalry gets watered down a little bit because at the end of the day, both teams can go into week 12 being number 1 and number 2 in the conference. And guess what happens week 13? Rematch. So we're going to see, I anticipate to see, especially with a great recruiting class by both schools this past year, we're going to see here in the near future that Ohio State and Michigan play each other 3 times in 1 year.
Yeah, 12. You and I talked about college rivalries. Mine is Auburn, Alabama. Yours is Michigan, Ohio State. And you just touched on the new landscape and how football is being changed, how these kids are potentially bouncing from team to team. You might have a kid that played for Ohio State last year, played for Michigan this year. So does that rivalry truly reach the same depth the way that it did with you guys, that you see with these younger kids?
You know what? I don't think so. And no disrespect to the rivalry, no disrespect to the new generation mentality. I think one thing that really played a big factor in the rivalry. Don't get me wrong, neither side want to lose this game, but I think it meant a little bit more to us because one, recruiting wasn't as nationally based as it is now. So you had so many guys from the Midwest or who was impacted by that rivalry at an early stage in life. Myself and you got, the kids from Toledo right on the border, and you got, kids in Chicago and all of that. So I made the comment earlier this week about before when you used to take the media day pictures at Ohio State, you used to do a team picture and you do a picture from all the kids from Ohio. And it used to be about, 45 to 50 kids from Ohio just on that team. So that played into that rivalry. Coach Meyer said a lot. He said he would recruit 1 or 2 guys a year just to make sure they help install that culture and making sure they're going to help us beat that team up north. And then the new dynamic it isn't as critical if you win or lose that game going down to the end of the season because 12 teams are going to get in. And like I said before, if you solidify yourself as a top 2 team in the Big Ten, you have a great chance of making it to the college football playoffs. And that's also going to give you a chance to win a national title.
I think the other thing that makes it a little different is like when you grew up in my era in the 90s, you went to Ohio State or Michigan to play against the other team. You went there for education, but you wanted to be a part of that rivalry. And with this transfer portal, you don't get a chance to play against your childhood buddies or somebody from Cleveland or somebody you was on a recruiting trip, because a lot of things have changed. And, it's funny that 12 gauge mentioned how you could play a team 3 times. I really thought Ohio State was going to play Oregon 3 times this year. And I'm thinking this isn't college football anymore. Now this is the Ravens against the Steelers twice a year and then possibly in the AFC title game. And I'm thinking, it's closer to pro football than anything where there's free agency from year to year. And that's what we're seeing in college. But, back when I played, you knew those guys were going to be at that one school for 4 years. I played against Eddie George and Terry Glenn, Orlando Pace, all those great Buckeyes. They weren't transferring. They weren't bringing in guys either. And they knew Charles Woodson and I were going to show up every other year. We were going to be on that team. And you were going to have to deal with those guys from Ohio who played for Michigan. Because back in the day, Michigan beat Ohio State with Ohio guys. Now it's just more national, as Cardale mentioned. So I think the rivalry has been watered down to a little bit, especially when you can watch a an 8-4 or whatever it was Michigan team beat Ohio State and give them the spark that they need to go into this system and run the table after Michigan showed everybody what the recipe was. But we won the game, but they won the Natty. And so 50 years from now, they're going to talk about 2025 national champions, Ohio State. They don't care who they lost to. They had 2 losses. So, and that's why I put a lot of emphasis on what Michigan did in 23 with Jim Harbaugh, with that team that had 40-plus seniors with 4th, 5th, and 6th-year guys. They were truly undefeated. They were truly the champ. And I think in college football, you have to go undefeated to prove you're the real champ.
Marcus, I want to stick with you just about the game, like the experience, and if both you guys could touch on and try to relate this to just the common fan that sees this game, one of the best rivalry in all of sports. I mean, you see the passion, you see the hatred. That's what it is. I worked at Michigan in 2017. It was a completely different beast than anything I've ever seen in all of college football. What can you maybe relate that experience to, that game day type of passion, waking up and being able to play in that game?
Well, I grew up, trying to be a Wolverine, and in my era, from 88 to 92, from the 6th grade, 7th grade to 11th grade, Michigan won 5 straight Big Ten titles, won a national championship in basketball. You had the Fab Five, you had Desmond Howard. And so when you start really following the rivalries, like, you grew up and wanted to be there. So my dream and my goal was to play in that stadium and beat Ohio State. I'm from Columbus. And I thought it was a bigger deal to play against them than with them. And so then when I start recruiting guys like Charles Woodson, guys who, as you look at those clips, I'm part of the reason for the targeting rule. That's why guys like Cardale couldn't take those kind of shots. But I'll tell you this right now. No. But I'll tell you, though, man, like, for me, it was a dream. My teachers were there. I had 50 people each time we played in Columbus Stadium. I had 50 people at the game when they came to Ann Arbor. And I always grew up as the villain, as a Michigan fan, and I wanted to wear that jacket. I wanted to play against Ohio State and be the guy from Columbus that went the other way and actually won. And just like I told you guys on my email, I waged war against my hometown, my home state, and their home team, and I won. Now, I'm not saying that paid off after football, but during that time, I feel like it was worth it, especially when we won the Natty, and then start looking at guys like Woodson who won the Heisman, and we raised Tom Brady under that same umbrella. But playing in that game, it's nothing like it. So for me, I hate to say it, it's one of my greatest achievements. I have children, I've done other things, but if I could lace them up one more time and walk in Ohio Stadium and play against any Ohio State team, I would do it right now, even out of shape.
Well, I'm glad we don't have a magic wand to lace y'all up against the 2014 Buckeyes, because I don't know how long you will last. I had to throw that shot in there for that targeting hit. But no, I think he hit the nail on the head when he talked about what it's like playing in that rivalry. Unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to go into that game knowing I was a starter, but always prepared like a starter, as we watched this clip of the first time I ever got a chance to play against against the Wolverines. And I know we get gold pants every time we beat them. And, I was fortunate enough to be a part of 4 teams that beat that team up north. And the only gold pants I really personally care about is the one from 14, because it's the only game I physically played in. But when you talk about just getting ready for that week, when you talk about being in that atmosphere, when you talk about, like I said before, everything back in my era now that was on the line going into week 12, it just meant so much more. There was no such thing as going to a significant bowl game or the playoffs if you don't beat that team up north in week 12. So with all those implications, I mean, there's nothing like it that I've been a part of when it comes to my athletic career. That's the magnitude, the history, the tradition on both sides, and that it means so much more than just the people in that stadium.
All right, Cardale, last question, and same to you, Marcus, as well. Cardale, I'll start with you. I want you to make the case on why you think Ohio State might dominate this rivalry for the next 4 to 5 years.
You know what? That's not my case, actually. I wouldn't say dominate. When I think of a dominant of a rivalry, I think the landscape has changed a lot as far as the portal and some things you're able to do in the NIL world to try to give teams, I mean, we're not talking about teams, I'm talking about the top dogs, a little bit more equal playing field. You see some things that Michigan just did in transfer portal. You see how they have developed a formula of who they are. I'm still extremely shocked that they got a quarterback as Bryce caliber, because they're not known as a team that's going to drop back and kill you through the air. They want to ground and pound you, play you in a phone booth, and rely on great running backs and great defense to beat you. And that formula ultimately won them a national title 2 years ago. And then you look on the other side of Ohio State football, what they're able to do at an extremely high level, playing against teams like Tennessee, Oregon, Texas in the national championship with Notre Dame. That's been their formula traditionally, having great playmakers on both sides of the ball and playing some lights out defense, guys flying around the field. So with those two completely polar opposite, styles of play on both sides of the ball, I don't think either team can say we're going to dominate the next one in the next 4 to 5 years coming. I think it's going to be based on who can continue to establish a culture that we don't lose to this team, and that the implications need to continue to be magnified. That's who we probably start to see who pull away in this rivalry a little bit more.
Yeah, and I share the same sentiments as 12 Gauge, but because in today's college football, I'm not sure if you have to dominate this game. I don't think the dominance matters. When you look at when I was growing up, from 88 to 2000, it was a Michigan thing. Then from 01 to 19, it was an Ohio State thing. And then Harbaugh found a way to put it together, and Michigan has won the last 4. So Ohio State has done a fine job of recruiting. They're always in the national championship conversation. That's the one thing I respect about the Buckeyes, regardless of what coach that they have. And Ryan Day's done a fine job creating his own niche. And now Sharon Moore, he has a hard act to follow. It took Jim Harbaugh 9 years. I think we got cheated in 2016 a little bit, but I don't know what that team would have did, in the playoffs. But I just feel like Ohio State has been so consistent that they have to bring in some kids that don't want to lose to Michigan, because they're not going to be able to keep beating Michigan and losing to Michigan and winning the national title in this 12-game tournament, because Michigan's going to be in there too this next season and beyond. So you want to win that game. I think for mental reasons, the conference championships really don't matter. I don't think either side can honestly predict that they're going to dominate. Now, they may win a game or two in a row and lose one, but I don't know if Michigan can win 4 more in a row. I don't think they can match what Ohio State did when Tressel and Urban was there. But at the same time, I think both teams have done a fine job recreating their brand, keeping the tradition going. And in this era of chaos in college football, they're putting championship teams together, whether you have to buy them or recruiting, whatever you have to do. Both teams are still at the top of the conversation in college football. They're always going to have a say in the national title, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I don't think either side can predict who's going to dominate.
Cardale Jones, Marcus Ray, we can't tell you how much we appreciate y'all's time, y'all's insight on this beautiful rivalry, one of the best in all sports. Appreciate it, guys.
Take care, folks. All right, 12.
All right, guys, for all Ohio State, Michigan coverage, you can go to bucknuts.com and the michiganinsider.com as well. Dave Biddle, Sam Webb, some of the best in the industry right here at 24/7 Sports. Oh, Brad Crawford, my man, Brad Crawford. On the Twitter sphere, I think that's what they call it. Why is DJ Lagway getting more preseason hype, love, adoration than Lenora Sellers right now? A great question from Brad Crawford. I love this one. I bookmarked it, Brad, and we are so happy to have you on. I'm so happy to be talking to you right now. Brad, I want to start with this question. Obviously, I know you're a guy that has a lot of love for the Gamecocks, and you study Lenora Sellers very, very closely. But I want to ask you your own question. Why did you feel like it was, hey, I got to bring DJ Lagway into this conversation? 2 of these guys, 2 of the best, most elite playmakers at their position in college football. Give us a little context on the tweet.
Yeah, I'll just start, man. I think both these guys are going to be top 3, maybe top 4 SEC quarterbacks next season. Both are probably going to be in the Heisman conversation. But here we are, March 3rd, man, the first 2.5 months or so of 2025. I just don't understand why DJ Lagway has received just considerably more offseason hype than Sellers after both these guys had terrific years, and Sellers was the national freshman quarterback of the year. I don't want to go just stats-wise, but Sellers had more passing yards, a better completion percentage despite 100 more attempts, more touchdowns, less turnovers, 600 more yards rushing, and oh, by the way, he led the Gamecocks to 6 straight wins to end the year, 3 against ranked teams, and had South Carolina for the first time in program history in that playoff conversation. So, Lenora Sellers from September to November, there's probably not a player in college football who made bigger strides under center at the quarterback spot than Sellers. And like I said, I think he and Lagway are going to be great. But based on what we saw last season on the field, I'm just surprised that Lagway has been ranked so much higher in a lot of these preseason power rankings.
Well, I'm gonna echo the sentiment that you said on both these guys being the stars of today and tomorrow of college football. And I think LaNorris Sellers, obviously, when you even go to Indianapolis and you talk about some of these guys that faced him in the SEC, the Walter Nolans of the world, Nick Scorton, all these guys, Shamar Stewart, they said the toughest guy that they played was LaNorris Sellers. So there's a lot of hype. I will make the case for one DJ Lagway on the other side. And I think, the other thing that you have to bring into consideration here is LaNorris Sellers is a grade older than DJ Lagway. You think about DJ Lagway, the number one player, at the position coming out just a year ago. You think about all the hype around him as well. And this is a situation where he gets slowly worked into the season. And you look at Florida and you look at that situation, Billy Napier was really dead in the water. Then DJ Lagway comes in. He starts his first game against Tennessee. He plays in 7 games. He's 5-2 during that time. And this is a completely different team. And then, Brad, this is kind of where the argument gets a little ambiguous, right? Because it's a subjective versus objective feel. You can look at the stat box and say, hey, one player's a lot better. And then you can look at the other player and say, hey, maybe he didn't produce in those same individual categories, but in terms of elevating his team, that's what he did. And nobody, just like they didn't want to play LaNorris Sellers in South Carolina at the end of the season, they didn't want to play Florida DJ Lagway as well. Billy Napier is the head coach of the Florida Gators because he got DJ Lagway right, and he's been going through a lot of turbulence during his time there. He got a lot of other parts right too, but he has been given extended life because he got the quarterback position right. So on the side of DJ Lagway and LaNorris Sellers, I think both these guys, are going to be the faces of college football this season.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but the injury to Graham Mertz, Coop, was a blessing in disguise for Florida. It allowed DJ Lagway, the kind of leash to come off of him and to get more reps late in the year. And like you said, I mean, the second half of the season, Sellers and Lagway were playing as good as anybody in the country. That includes Heisman winner Travis Hunter. So, I mean, I think Lagway is a player that maybe his upside is higher as a passer. Sellers more of the dual threat type at, 6'5", 245 pounds. There's a reason Sellers has been, nicknamed kind of baby Cam Newton from those around the SEC, is because he's such a load to bring down. Whereas DJ is always going to be a, pass first type guy. He's mobile, but he has a good arm. So Lagway and Sellers, we're going to be talking about these guys a long time over 2025.
Yeah, Brad, you used the word maybe in terms of a passer. Now, I'm not going to say maybe. I'm going to say, as of right now, DJ's a better passer, the younger guy. So when you study the stats, DJ's stats are more impactful than LaNorris. LaNorris' stats stand ahead of his. That's okay. Just give me a second. Are ahead of his just because they're looming and they look good. But when you look at just the raw playmaking ability and the importance of those plays and those throws, yeah, DJ impact more than LaNorris Sellers for the Florida Gators than he did for the Gamecocks last year. That's just on film.
Yeah, I don't know, man. There were tons of third downs where without LaNorris Sellers, I mean, Spencer Rattler would have been sacked 55 times last season. Sellers got sacked 40 times behind a bad offensive line, whereas in comparison, Florida had one of the better O-lines in the country. That's why Lagway, didn't get banged up the way LaNorris did. LaNorris had a 75-yard touchdown run against LSU, had a 3-touchdown lead in that game. Had he played in the second half and Robbie Ashford not have had to, lead 5 scoreless possessions, maybe the Gamecocks from the playoff and LaNorris Sellers is the first-team All-SEC quarterback. So I think he's a guy on third down, Smoke, that really changed the complexion of South Carolina's offense. The one question I have this year going into spring practice is sort of like Penn State and Drew Aller. I mean, who is wide receiver 1 at South Carolina? Florida and Lagway, we know the weapons around him, some guys coming back, some guys they got in the portal. The Gamecocks still need a wide receiver 1. And unless it's Nick Harbor stepping up in a big way that, I don't foresee happening, you have to kind of wonder the weapons around LaNorris. Is he going to have the same numbers he had last season? So I don't know, man. I like LaNorris Sellers right now if I had to take a quarterback in the SEC to start my franchise. But DJ Lagway is right up there for me, too.
Yeah, and like you said, the truly and better dynamic runner, that's not DJ's game. But when you're talking about just quarterback play from the pocket with poise, throwing the ability to throw it with touch, anticipation, That's the kind of guy that you want to be able to build your program around. Not saying that you can't do it with North Sellers, because that's just another way of doing it. But the way that I would want to do it, and I think the way that Billy Napier wants to do it, is with DJ. And DJ just poses a different threat just because he can beat you both with his legs. And we didn't see that a lot just because he had the hammy injury. But he's a good runner. But he's just a better passer right now. When you're a dual threat player, you have to be able to throw the ball. One guy just runs the ball at a better clip right now in terms of the Sellers.
Yeah, I think that the beauty about this is it depends what your preference is, right? I think Lenora Sellers, DJ Lagway, both these guys, especially when you start talking about NFL traits, Lenora Sellers is going to be one of those guys NFL teams are going to be coming back to. Brad, you mentioned guys like Cam Newton. I think Anthony Richardson's going to come up as well, maybe more similar, comparable from a passing skill set standpoint right now. DJ's still got 2 years left as well. There's no wrong answer. That's the beauty of this. Brad, you also have some daring predictions out for 2025. One of those, I got to be honest, it surprised me a little bit. Alabama winning the SEC championship. And, Brad, I just got to ask you, what's your confidence level in that quarterback situation there in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, confidence level in the quarterback situation is not high at all. But look, the last two off seasons, man, I have been down on Bama. Last 2 years, I'm one of the few national guys who has picked Bama not to reach the playoff. They kind of backed in 2 years ago when they upset Georgia and Atlanta and got that last bid with, Milroe to play Michigan and lose at the 1 yard line. But last season's team, that's not indicative, man, of what we're going to see out of Caleb DeBoer at Bama. I have not sold all my DeBoer stock yet. I think the quarterback position from a passing standpoint is going to be better off this season. You bring in Grubb from the Seahawks. He is DeBoer's right-hand man. We're going to see Ryan Williams have 1,000-yard, 15 touchdown type season. He's going to develop into a true, top 10 caliber pick. I think late in the year last year, Ryan Williams struggled a bit because maybe him and Jalen Milroe weren't on the same page in that passing game. This is going to change, whether it's Ty Simpson, Keelan Russell, or maybe the wild card Austin Mack. But Bama's going to be better suited at quarterback, and I think the schedule this season sets up favorably for a SEC championship run.
Yeah, schedule, I agree with you. Quarterback is kind of sus right now because there's no way that you can tell me that a second-round draft pick, which right now that's where they're having Jalen Milroe go, is not a better player than Ty Simpson. Now, throwing the football is also great. But who's he throwing to other than Ryan Williams? I mean, there's just holes all over the place in receiver number 2 and number 3, and there's a spot out there at right tackle and left guard that we don't know who's playing. So you make me feel good. My wife feel good as well, too, by saying you believe that they will be in the SEC championship. But, man, I'm scratching my head right now just figuring out how are they going to get these wins.
They got some pieces. Isaiah Horton they bring over from Miami. Jeremy Bernard comes back as well. This is a team, offensive line. They're going to have to mix some things up a little bit. Brad, the one thing that you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned his name there a little bit. Similar to Florida, I'm not saying they're going to be in the same kind of win-loss predicament that Florida was in last year, but when you look at Alabama, the young signal caller, Keelan Russell, I'm looking at this thing. His mouth has to be salivating a little bit. I mean, we love this kid here at 24/7 Sports, and you think about his play style, where he's come from, Duncanville, this guy, championship pedigree, Ryan Grubb, new offensive coordinator. And if you're Kalen DeBoer, and we talked about this with John Talty, you're trying to balance timelines between the short term and the long term, and you're in year 2. And guess what? Maybe it doesn't go well with a Ty Simpson or an Austin Mack. I'd have a quick trigger on Keelan Russell because I think that kid is different, and you can also sell the now and you can sell the future as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. That it's going to be a short leash on both those guys. Ty Simpson, foreseeably, man, could lose a third quarterback competition in his career. How many guys can say they've done that entering spring practice? He's a guy that has to show it, too. I mean, he has had opportunity behind Jalen to, supplant QB1 and take that job by the horns, and he just hasn't done it. So I do think the odds-on favorite to be the starting quarterback in September is Ty Simpson. But long-term, this is Keelan Russell's offense. This is his program. Bama kept him for a reason, and, he's kind of the guy that DeBoer has tied his ship to. I mean, he's the guy that if Bama makes the playoff 2 of the next 3 seasons, Keelan Russell's going to be the one that's leading the way.
Yeah, it's ironic because it's very similar to South Carolina. They go as far as a guy like Lenora Sellers goes, and obviously they have the defense. Florida the same way with DJ Lagway. Those guys are the real amplifiers. Brad, you had another daring prediction as well. This one is in Chapel Bill Belichick. You said he's going to start out 0-3 in his first 3 games in Power 4 play. You look at the schedule there. You got TCU at home. You're on the road in Orlando against first-year head coach Scott Frost, throwback. And then you got Clemson at home as well. So make the case why the Tar Heels might be 0-3 in Power 4 play under Bill Belichick.
Yeah, you guys know I live about an hour from Chapel Hill. All the preseason hype is nothing to do with Tobacco Road and basketball, fellas. It's all Bill Belichick season right now. But that said, spring practice starts this week, and we have no idea how this Tar Heels 2 deep is going to look under Bill Belichick. We don't know who QB1 is right now. We don't know who the offensive arsenal is after losing Amarion Hampton, a guy I think should be a first-round pick at running back. The openers against TCU, bowl team last year. They're going to probably be an 8 or 9 win team in the Big 12. And can you imagine the pressure that's going to be on Belichick to win at night on Labor Day at home inside Kenan Stadium? That's a tough game. I wouldn't be surprised if TCU is a small favorite in that game. Then you look at UCF and Orlando. That's never an easy road trip. And then Clemson comes to Chapel Hill as the preseason ACC favorite. So UNC probably going to be 2-3 after September. They are going to bowl season this year, but those first 3 Power 4 games, man, I don't like it for Coach Bill Belichick.
So you said Chapel Bill, and we know what Bill is like when he was in New England. He just wears you down. And those guys were getting paid when they were in the Patriots building. Guys are getting paid now in college, but they have the opportunity to leave and hit the transfer portal. So just say, hypothetically speaking, they go 0-4. What is that morale going to be like in that building, Brad?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of UNC fans who are maybe, middling between the basketball and football program right now sell all their Bill Belichick stock. Because if he, goes 5-7 in year one against arguably one of the Power Four's easiest schedules, I mean, you guys look at this thing from top to bottom, man. There's a lot of games that UNC will be favored in just by showing up because it's that easy when you don't play, the top 5 or 6 ACC teams. Clemson is really the only tough game that they're going to be athletically marginalized at. But I just think UNC is a team that, expectations should be about 7-5 in year one. But if they do lose those first 3 games of the year to Power 4 competition, sans wins over Charlotte and Richmond in the opening month, there's going to be some griping in Chapel Hill. Why are we paying this guy, $10.5 million a season?
Brad, a little cold water for your friends in Chapel Hill. Protect yourself, buddy. Only an hour away, like you said. Brad Crawford, we appreciate you, man, as always. Guys, be sure to check out his work at 247sports.com, including his 10 daring predictions for the 2025 season. Guys, we also have some great news this week as we welcome a new team site to the network. That is PantherLayer.com for all the latest news in recruiting on Pittsburgh football. Make sure to check out PantherLayer.com. We will also be joined by Chris Peak, Panther Layer's publisher, this Wednesday on the Ultimate College Football Show for a spring preview of everything Pitt football. Smoke, it's time, baby. You hear it? You hear that crackling? It's time for some ultimate burning questions. Fired up about this. First time on the hot seat here. And this is from Kicker_glitch. He says, what will the NFL Combine look like in the next 5 years? And let me give a little context to this. You brought it up today, pre-production. I thought it was a great question that you asked. This was actually something that was kind of brought up in Indianapolis when I was there. There are a lot of star-studded players not working out at the NFL Combine. And guess what? This is not just unique to the NFL. This goes all the way down to high school where guys aren't running anymore. They're not testing. It's starting to get a little bit concerning, and it's getting concerning for those guys in the league office up in New York, too.
Yeah, that was the rumblings that I got. Like, the top guys aren't participating. Like, you go back to last year, the first overall pick, Caleb Williams, didn't do anything. He just showed up, walked around. Shedeur interviewed, did medical, but he's waiting on that Big 12 Pro Day. So, you know me, I'm a conspiracy theorist. In a few years, what I believe is going to happen is the SEC is going to have their own Pro Day. Big 10 is going to have their own Pro Day. And the Big 12 will also have their Pro Day, too. And you're going to see less and less of young people go to Indy to actually perform. They're just going to show up for medical, interviews, and get right out of there.
So here's the other question I would ask you. Why perform at a conference pro day over Indianapolis? What's the benefit for a Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders to say, you know what, I'm going to go work out in Dallas rather than Indy?
Well, for those guys, they're always looking at how can they bring some type of notoriety, marketing opportunity to Colorado. And when you do that now, you're saying, okay, I'm putting my school on more than I'm putting on the shield. Because I know when I go to the NFL, the chance of me coming back to my school and putting my school on and bringing notoriety to them is lessened. And now you might have a few guys like Shiloh that does not have the ability to go to the combine. But what does he have? They have the ability to now go to that pro day. So now I have the ability to bring more scouts, more big-name general managers out to the Big 12 pro day for them to see my younger brother and the rest of my teammates perform.
It's going to be fascinating in the light that the NFL, this is a cash cow for them, right? It's all been about commercializing the NFL Combine in Indianapolis, letting fans there, letting more phones in the building as well. It's going to be interesting kind of how they adjust to this. The other thing is, if you're not working out, it's going to hit your wallet at some point, right?
Well, hitting your wallet, no shot, because what are you looking at now in college? These young guys are getting paid well. There's some making well in the mid six figures. There's a few making a few million. So now, just talking to some of the scouts, they're getting back information and just saying, what's the drive for these young people? For me, when I got into it, I wanted to get as much money as I possibly can when I was trying to get to the NFL. But when you're in college, you're getting paid as much as some rookies in terms of their salary. So we got to tie that together. College guys are getting paid a lot of money to now not go to the NFL if they're 5th or 7th round draft picks. And they're also not caring about going to Indy and working out just because they know they have another pro day. Plus, they made a ton of money already. So what's at stake?
Yeah, we'll see what happens this year, right? With a couple of these guys not working out. All right, next question here. This one back to the high school recruiting side from Julian.Espinoza. He says, how do you think DeCorian Moore will do at Oregon in his first year? DeCorian Moore, if you were to go back and you were to look at the receivers that came out, Jeremiah Smith's class, the number one receiver, you go down the list, Cam Coleman started to put it together a little bit later in the year. Think about Ryan Williams. You think about some of these other guys like TJ Moore and Ryan Wingo and Gatlin Bears coming off his mission at Oregon. That was a generational class. I bring that up to say that I think DeCorian Moore fits in that conversation. Would he be one of the top 3 guys? No. I think those guys have really already clearly stated that they're very different. But DeCorian Moore is pretty different from everybody else in this class. He's different than a Khalil Lockett. He's different than a Jerome Miles. DeCorian Moore is a day one guy, and you look up to Eugene. They lose their receivers coach, Junior Adams. He's off to Dallas with the Cowboys. And you look at that room. Tez Johnson's gone. Trayshawn Holden's gone. You look at tight end. Terrence Ferguson's gone. And the quarterback's gone, right, with Dylan Gabriel. And you got Dante Moore there. The thing is, and we've talked about this, Oregon's done a phenomenal job with talent acquisition. They've really built this roster from the ground up. But the job that they've done in the transfer portal has really allowed these guys to develop organically. The guys that are playing in Eugene early are the guys that are ready to play. They don't rush anybody else. DeCorian Moore, I believe, from what we've seen in recent history under Dan Lanning, is that outlier, is a guy that can match up opposite of Evan Stewart and give Oregon and Dante Moore maybe something a little bit different than they haven't had in past years. And the other thing, I brought this up with like Keelan Russell. These guys are playing high level of comp. They have the track and field background. The competitive nature of this kid, he played 2 ways at the Polynesian Bowl. We're talking about guys not working out.
And dominated.
Right. You want to know why he's different. It's because of, not only is he physically gifted, but between the ears, he's got it too.
Yeah, cool. Cutting the tape on with this guy, he was the cleanest receiver in this class. And you look at it, he just performed at a different level. Like when you watch the game, he's like, oh yeah, those are high school guys. He looked like a college sophomore playing against high school football players. And that's not saying that he's a generational talent or he's going to be the next first-round draft pick coming out of Oregon, but he just looked different. And like you said, I don't know him personally, but you've seen him in combine action. He looks like his mentality is far more different than the regular high school kid that's going into a college. He's going in saying, you know what, I'm going to be 3 and done, and if I show up to Indy, I might not work out, but the world's going to know that I'm going to put you on notice every single Saturday that I go out there.
Reminds me a lot of Malik Neighbors. Not just on the field either. You know, Malik Neighbors was a dog that could beat you a lot of different ways. Swiss Army knife, could beat you out of the slot, could beat you on the perimeter as well. The run after catch was so explosive and dynamic. But the mentality, like that little insight into Hard Knocks, the offseason, them interviewing Malik Neighbors, you understand why they were attracted to such a player. All right, last question here that we have from Brady B. He says, you guys mentioned you only see 7 to 9 wins for Colorado. Who do you think is the Big 12 favorites? Seems like league is wide open again this year. Great question, because I think that league belongs to anybody, but I'm going to give credit to Texas Tech and what they've done. And James Blanchard, we talk a lot about on this show, the general manager over there. A lot of talk whether or not he'd end up in South Bend. Joey McGuire was able to keep him home there in Lubbock. This transfer class, I don't want it to be mistaken for just a high quantity of players, because that is not the case. It is a high quantity of quality players that they have brought in at a lot of different positions. You look at how they've attacked the line of scrimmage at the offensive line. You think about the 2 tackles coming over from North Carolina, Miami, Ohio, and what they've been able to do. Lee Hunter coming over from UCF, Amir Boy Matthews coming over in the secondary from UTEP. These are all height, weight, speed guys. But similar to how we were talking about with John, I think Joey McGuire and his group of NIL supporters maybe looked at the landscape in the Big 12 and said, you know what, Arizona State just went to the playoffs. A year before, they won 3 games. What are we doing? You know, we're sitting on this pile of cash, rumored to be around $10 to $15 million, right? Let's go out before revenue share kicks in, and let's be really, really aggressive, and let's put our best foot forward. You look at Texas Tech and how they've positioned themselves, they're a big case study for me. Will it work out? I don't know. But I love what they're doing. Why not if you're in the Big 12 and you don't know whether it's going to be Arizona State, you don't know whether it's going to be Kansas State, you don't know whether it's going to be Colorado. And to the point of the question, it could end up being any of those schools. We don't know. I mean, you look at the win total last year from Arizona State, kind of proved that, right? So, yeah, in terms of a favorite, I don't know who it is, but Texas Tech would be the school that I would look at.
Man, it's crazy you said Arizona State, because that's what I'm going to go with. And I'm just a big believer in Kenny Dillingham and Sam Levitt, the quarterback, and what they did overall in the transfer portal, ensuring that their offensive line stayed intact, got a lot of those guys back. We talked about roster retention. A lot of their guys came back and they're playing. Up front, defensively, they're good. So now I just want to look at it and say, okay, the landscape's changed a little bit in the Big 12. It's becoming a physical ball game. What they do, they went out and got Kanye Udo, running back from Army, put him back there just to replace Cam. And you have quarterback, running back, line of scrimmage play on both sides, an explosive play out on the outside in terms of Tyson Jordan. I think they're a recipe for success. And again, we know that the older teams have served well with a longer season, knowing what they have to go through to get to the promised land.
What is the, real quick, what's your feel on the quarterback? How legit is he, Sam Levitt?
I think he's an NFL player. I think he has all the tools that you're looking for. Whenever I say NFL player, everybody's automatically thinking first overall pick. No, there's backups in the NFL, and there's guys that take 2 to 3 years just to get on the field to play. But when you look at him from the neck up, his ability to process, I think it's at a high, high level when you see him play.
Going to be a fun year in the Big 12. Smoke, I appreciate it, man. A marathon of a show. Had a great time. Guys, we appreciate you watching, as always. Just a reminder, we got a big show on Wednesday as well for the 2026 Top 247 update. We hope you can join us. Just a reminder, you can find us every Monday and Wednesday at 3 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. For Smoke Dixon, I'm Cooper Patagna. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time.